Thanks very much, Keith. Conference, good morning. On behalf of the DEFRA ministerial team, and I've got a great group of colleagues with whom I'm privileged to work, Phil Wallace, Jeff Rooker, Joan Ruddock and Jonathan Shaw, I want to begin by thanking all of those people who've worked so hard during the summer to help people affected by the terrible floods. People like the driver I met in Doncaster on my very first day in this job, who was delivering sandbags to make sure that pensioners and families were protected even though the water was still rising in his own home. The staff I met in a rest centre, providing shelter and a comforting word to those who had nowhere else to go. Neighbour helping neighbour, showing the strength and humanity of the British people when times are tough. And I also want to thank all those who are working so hard and with such calm purpose to contain the outbreak of foot and mouth and to deal with blue tongue, both causing so much worry and hardship to our farmers across the country. And I know, Conference, that you will want to thank all of these people too. Now, in their different ways, both these events remind us just how delicate is our relationship with this small and fragile planet. We can't take it for granted, but we can help to safeguard it. And thanks to what we've done over the past 10 years, we now have cleaner rivers and beaches, purer water to drink, healthier air to breathe, and a countryside that is open to each and every one of us to enjoy. And I can confirm today that we now intend to legislate so that each of us has, for the first time in our history, the right to walk around our coastline, from the white cliffs of the south coast to the wild cliffs of Northumberland. And we'll do this. And we will do this because access to all is a Labour value, and it should apply as much to our coast as it does to education or our health services. But the truth, Conference, is that we need to do much, much more. We face a very stark choice. Britain can either lead the world in a low-carbon transformation of our economy, in protecting our countryside and our wildlife, in renewing our cities, in creating jobs, in new environmental industries, or we can be left behind. As individuals, we can either learn to live sustainably today, or in a few years' time, we can face having to tell our grandchildren why, as a generation, we did not act while we still had time. Climate change is happening now. This was the wettest summer on record. The last 12 months have been the hottest on record. And that's just in Britain. Look around the world. Hurricanes in Central America, drought in Australia, floods and drought in Africa. Last year, I went to a place called Wajid in Somalia, where 11,000 people were living in makeshift shelters covered in scraps of cloth and bits of plastic that they'd taken from the town rubbish tip. Why? Because it had stopped raining where they were living. Climate change had put their lives on hold. What are we going to do, Conference, when people in the world start fighting, not about politics, but about water? What are we going to do when the refugees arriving at our shores are fleeing not political persecution, but environmental catastrophe? That's why we must act now. And our climate change bill is going to make us the first country in the world to put carbon reduction targets into law. And as the Prime Minister announced on Monday, we will now review whether we need a stronger target than our already ambitious 60% reduction by 2050. But you know, Conference, people don't live their lives through bills and targets and plans. They live them in their daily experience. And our politics must be about their future. And it's not what we have done that really matters now. It's what we will do together for the next generation, reaching out to those who share our values as individuals, as activists, as a movement for change. What could that change look like? Imagine a child born today. By the time she's 3 years old, we will be recycling and composting 40% of our waste. Ray, you asked the question a moment ago. That's what we're going to do. By the time she's 8, Britain will be generating 15% of our electricity from renewables, 3 times as much as we do today. By the time she celebrates her 9th birthday, every single new house built that year and for the rest of her life is going to be zero carbon. Millions of existing homes will have been better insulated, and microgeneration will be a reality for many of her friends and neighbours, and not just a few pioneers. And as she grows up, she will be able to see the London Array generating enough electricity from wind power to supply 1 in 4 of the homes in Greater London. All of this is possible. In fact, all of this is what we're going to do. And that's why I'm pleased to be able to tell you today of the next step we are taking. The major retailers and the energy suppliers are now leading a voluntary initiative with the strong support of the lighting industry and of the government to help phase out traditional high-energy light bulbs. We need to turn them off for good. And so our aim is for traditional 150-watt light bulbs to be phased out by January next year, 100-watt bulbs the year after, 40-watt bulbs the year after that, and all high-energy light bulbs by 2011. Conference, that will save 5 million tonnes of CO2 a year and take us closer to our 2050 target. But we also have to learn to adapt to the climate change that is already changing our planet. And that's why early next year we will set out a new adaptation plan that will look at the risks to our communities and our wildlife from rising temperatures, from flooding, from drought, and how we should respond. It's why we are leading in Europe to reform the common agricultural policy and make sure that we nurture and protect our biodiversity, including bird life. And with the publication of our draft marine bill, we will realise a long-held dream to extend the protection we already have for the wonders of our countryside to the wonders of our seas and what lies beneath them. But whatever we do here in the UK, it's what we do internationally that will decide whether the world can prevent catastrophic climate change. On Monday, I was in New York at the United Nations, where Ban Ki-moon had brought together heads of government and heads of state from around the globe for the first time to call for action. And December's crucial meeting in Bali must answer that call by agreeing to start negotiations on a new international deal to replace the Kyoto Protocol and make us a low-carbon world. Every country must play its part, from China to the United States of America. The biggest economy in the world must take on binding commitments to reduce emissions. Voluntary action isn't enough. And as Al Gore has taught us, we have to speak the truth, even if it is inconvenient for some. Conference, learning to live within the means of our fragile planets demands a new politics. A politics that listens and works more closely with people. A politics that makes it clear what we stand for. You can't be in favour of renewable energy and against wind farms. You can't be in favour of environmental regulation and against action in Europe. A politics that recognises that tackling climate change and sustaining our environment is part of the same fight that has inspired our party from our beginning, the fight for social justice. A politics that asks each and every one of us to make our contribution. Neighbour, helping, neighbour. These are our values. They're what inspires us. And it's why we want to change the world. But to do that, we first have to save it. And we can only do so together.